Welcome to the Counselor's Chair, a podcast brought to you by Traverse Counseling Services. Join us as we explore all things human, mental health, psychology, philosophy, and a few extras. Be sure to check us out on all forms of social media and visit our YouTube channel at The Counselor's Chair. Hey folks, Josh here, and welcome back to The Counselor's Chair. In this episode, we'll be talking with licensed professional counselor, certified supervisor, certified grief counselor, and Lee University professor, Lena Barber. Lena is a longtime friend of mine, and we're absolutely privileged to have her on for a conversation about grief. Our conversation wound up covering everything from teaching kids the grieving process to Lena's own experiences with grief, and a lot in between, including the role of spirituality and religion. Lena is a devout Christian and as genuine about her beliefs as you're going to find, so it's really awesome to have this aspect explored in connection with grief. All that to say, this particular conversation is one of the most real, insightful, and meaningful conversations I've had in the last 10 years, and man, am I excited to share it. Alrighty, sit back, relax, and enjoy the listen. Cheers. Here, really appreciate you having you here.
Thank you for having me. I love being here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And today we're going to have a conversation about grief.
Good grief.
Good grief. And there's obviously a few reasons why I was really excited to have you on, Andrew isn't going to be with us today, by the way, guys. He's on vacation. And he's out for the next couple of weekends, so it's just Lena and I today. But so I said I, but I meant we. We're really happy to have you on the podcast for several reasons. One being that you're a certified grief counselor, correct?
Yes.
And plenty of experience in the field, and also even volunteering at hospice, and probably a myriad of things I don't even know about. But also your own personal story too, and hopefully we can get into some of that today.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to.
Awesome. So I thought a great question to just kick it off with would be like how, I guess from your experience and from your education, how do you define grief?
I think we grieve a lot when we don't realize it. We're grieving because we consider that we have losses, but nobody ever taught us how to lose. From the moment of birth, we're taught to get a good education, to get a job, to get.
Yeah.
And our parents, being good parents, avoid loss with us and try to protect us from that. And I think we're not aware of that. So grief, I think, is any change of the normal routine. And you can even have grief when it's a good thing, like going away to college. And we don't see that. And so we wonder, why am I feeling so bad when I should be feeling good? And that should is a curse word. Because we're just not, we're not educated in the possibility that there are other losses other than death, and even in good things, we have a loss of dependence when we come to school. We have a loss of family. We have a loss of being right there, and even though it's a good thing, there's still a loss. Just as there's a loss of anything like that we change our normal routine, and I think that's what grief really is learning the new routine.
What a good way.
And so it is this emotional roller coaster. Grief consists of so much of that, and we have never learned that two extremely different emotions can coexist. And so grief turns us into a lot of turmoil because we've never learned how to do that. And so avoiding loss by anything that we can really is detrimental to us, even with our children. And hopefully I'll tell you something today with your 3 children that you can see and that will make you very aware of that.
Yeah, and I think you already hit on one, which is as a parent, it's our roles to help our children understand, and grandchildren to understand what loss is.
Absolutely.
And what death is as well, and in regards to all the other losses or changes that you talked about as well. And then how to cope with those. It reminds me of two things. One, this is going to be an excellent follow-up to the last podcast we did, because we talked about the avoidance of death altogether in our own minds, and talked about personally accepting that. But I think grief starts to extend to when there's losses in your environment or in your family, and so that you definitely hit on something there, and also hit on something as a parent. Like I was reading an existential text in the last couple of months, and I may have mentioned it before, but they actually say, the existentialists say, it's the primary role of the parent to help your child understand and conceptualize death. Right. And I mean, they put a lot of emphasis on it, right? The primary role. But it made me think of today. I took Avit fishing. I took him fishing early this morning, and we were walking on the trail back to the car, and there was a father and son fishing, and he had stopped me. He was like, "Hey, I'm here with my son too." His son looked like he was maybe 30, and so he looked maybe in his early 50s, mid 50s, and so we talked for a little while. And I told him, I was like, "Man, I really hope that, I hope that someday my son and I are still fishing at that age." And we were walking on the trail, and I actually said that to Avit. I was like, "Oh, we'll be doing this for the rest of our lives." And he was like, "Yep, and then you're gonna die." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right, I will." And I was like, "But you get to teach this to your kids, right?" And he was like, "Yeah, and then they can teach it to their kids, and they can teach it to their kids." And then he said something along the lines of like, "And we get to live on that way." He said something along those lines. Good. Way more kid conceptualized in those words, but
very good.
Yeah, it made me think of that, and I thought, man, thank God, I'm doing something right for him to put words around it like that. So when you said that made me think of that. But I guess too, I whenever I think grief, I immediately go to death and loss, right?
Yes.
But I think there's, you accented grief when somebody's just going away to college, that type of change, the lack of dependence, or even for the parents grieving the lack of dependence from their children. I guess in regards to that type, particularly in a parental role, like how have you handled the transitions of your own children in their adult lives, and what are some of the things that you feel like you've done over the course of their lives, maybe to help them understand loss in the grieving process?
Well, let me go back to when they were children, and I wish I could do it all over again, because we're always evolving, and I've learned a lot of this since they've grown up. But I get to use this with my grandchildren, and in that we can still help. And do you remember that, especially in my generation, a lot of the people that had losses, they would send the children to the other room. They didn't involve them. And so when my dad was sick with cancer 8 years ago, he died 8 years ago, but when he was sick, we made sure that the girls were involved. And I think they were 5 and 3. And so the granddaughters. And so I don't know whether you ever did this, but little girls always like to play waitress. And so they'd get a little paper and pen, and we got Dad a doorbell. And every time he wanted something from his hospice bed, he'd ring that doorbell and they'd come running. And they would take his order, get him water, or take him to the bathroom, and they'd do a choo-choo train to the bathroom, and he would hold their shoulders. It's very important to involve them, to let them know what's happening, not to... You protect them by being a community. You protect them by saying, we're going to do this together. You'll never have to be alone. You don't isolate them.
Right. You're not protecting them from the loss. Like the community aspect and the support within the community is sort of the protection of their innocence.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so they were part of it. They were never, because think about it, when children go to the other room, they only have their peers to answer the questions. And so the questions that they have, you never hear because they're in the other room. And certainly they're, I've heard so many people say, my children won't go to a funeral. I'll leave them home. And I think it's very important to include the scariest thing in the world to a child is to be isolated. And for grown-ups to be talking about something, certainly they don't need to hear everything. They don't need to be in on the tough decision-making that you're doing. But like my dad started taking chemo and he was losing his hair. And we had a hair cutting party, and I brought wigs and hats, and we gave him a mohawk first, and then we had a really good time doing this, and we explained to them he's going to take chemo treatment to try to get him through this part of his cancer so he can be healthy. The fact of life is that we're all going to die. And I know my family always prayed that the Lord would come and take us all together, right? That's the thing we pray. Let's all go together so nobody has to stay behind and grieve. I have one little story that was very significant. It was about that time, and I was staying at my mom and dad's house with them, and then my daughter with the mother of my grandchildren our backyards intersected, so they were there a lot. And so they came to get me and said there was a mommy bird that had baby birds in a light over their deck, and we could see it from the deck if we stood off. So we were watching this. My mother was out there, my daughter, the two girls, and it was a scientific educational thing. We were explaining that the mommy bird was getting worms and chewing them up, and they would say, "Oh, gross!" And we were all involved in this. And about the third trip out, one little bird came out too far from the nest and fell to its death. And the first instinct my daughter had was to take her two girls and pull her face away from them and toward her. And so I tapped her on the shoulder and I mouthed, "Do you trust me?" Because I do not get involved in my daughter raising her children, because I had my turn. Now it's hers. Yeah. But she did, and I stooped down to them and I said, "Girls, I think the baby bird might be dead." And they start crying all over again. My daughters wondered, "What?" And so I said, "I think the baby bird might be dead. I'm going to go check on it, but I need some gloves." So one of the little girls ran inside, got gloves, and we looked, and sure enough, the baby bird wasn't moving. I didn't even think about if the mother bird had come back. But I said, the baby bird is dead, crying again. And here's the thing that I do. I want to go back to this. We give nonverbal cues about that crying is bad. And we give it to children early on, and it goes in songs like "Big girls don't cry, big boys don't cry." And the first thing that happens when somebody cries is they're handed a tissue. And I never do that. I'll put the tissue out, and I say at the beginning of my session, "There's the tissue if you want it, but I'm really comfortable with your tears. And so this is a safe place for you to be able to show that emotion, because we've been given all these nonverbal cues." So the girls are crying. I'm crying too. I'm crying because they're crying, you know? And so we're crying together. And I said, "What do you think we should do?" And they started thinking about, "Well, we need to have a funeral." Yes, I agree. And we were all plotting together. And that's what you do, is you're together in this. And what they bring to the table is very important. And so it was right after Valentine's Day. It was the spring, and they had a heart box, and one of them went and got the heart box. And we had a service for that baby bird that day that was unbelievable. One sang, one preached, and we buried that bird under the bush.
That's sweet.
And and that was, but these small things, think about it. They didn't know this bird. They had just watched it for a couple of minutes, and they had no relationship with the bird, right? And what a perfect opportunity to teach them about death.
Yes.
You know, it instead of protecting them from it and not allowing them to become resilient in loss, we robbed them of this great opportunity. And so what we did was, this is what I always say, you know, this is sad and it hurts, but we're all in this together. Nobody's going to be isolated, and nobody's going to go through this alone. And one of the myths I think that we were raised with is, if you're going to grieve, you grieve alone. And it's said to us this way: if you're going to cry, go to your room. Or remember this, if you're going to cry, I'm going to give you something to cry about. Right? And so we tend to isolate that. And I think there are so many recorded messages that we're given, even non-verbally, that we grow up with, that play out later on in our life. And I'll give you a for instance. What about replace the loss? Remember the first time you lost a pet?
Yeah, I do, actually. It was the one that's coming to mind was a turtle.
Turtle?
Yeah, it was a turtle.
Did you cry?
Yeah, especially because we assumed that he died. He actually disappeared on us, but in my mind,
sure,
I thought this turtle had died, like a predator had come and nabbed it. It was like a wild turtle, but we had it in a little pen under my playhouse when we lived in DC. So, yeah, that's the first real animal loss I remember, and especially because I didn't get to part ways with it.
Absolutely, which is very critical in the grieving process. Closure, burying that bird was closure for them. Yes, and funerals have their rightful place. I think it gives you opportunity to go the gamut with it, you know. My first loss was a little duck. It used to be that at Easter they would dye the ducks. I don't think you can do that anymore. But I had a blue duck, and I remember one day one day after school, it was in the kitchen. We had a little pen over in the corner, right at the back deck, and I was looking in the cupboards, and you know how you balance kind of with your knees bent, you're looking, and I lost my balance, and I fell right on my duck. And I didn't kill it. The duck, I broke its neck, and he went all around the kitchen quacking. Oh, no. And I ran to my room saying, I was a murderer, I'm a murderer, I'm a murderer. And my brother had to finish the job. But I cried long enough that I got another animal, replacing the loss, right? Okay. And so how does that, instead of grieving it, and I think this is also true in relationships, So how does it look when you get out of a relationship? Do you grieve that relationship? Do you go through the baggage and say, what can I have done differently? What have I learned from it? Can I see red flags earlier? What can I look for? But we've told ourselves that we don't hurt as badly if we hurry up and get into another relationship. And so I see it all the time with young people getting out of a relationship on Friday, and by Monday they've got a new boyfriend or girlfriend, right? So
there's a lot to be learned in the grieving process.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And, a lot of life lessons that you can take away, those red flags that you were talking about, or like maybe it's an indication too of whether you should be in a relationship or not.
Absolutely.
I was thinking too, Lena, that idea of I was kind of solid in two separate pieces. That one where you're talking about isolating the child, and then the parent taking on the brunt of the grieving process. I think too what might happen there, I just thought of it as you were saying it, is that it reinforces to the child later on in life that that's how they should deal with grief too. They should protect their children from it, because they get to a certain age and they realize, wow, my mom or my dad completely, or my grandparents or my teachers or whoever is primary in their life, I guess they realize they hid a lot from me in regards to death. So that must be what I need to do for everyone else around me. And so then we have this really unhealthy conceptualization that grief is sort of this burden that we place onto ourselves and try and protect everyone from in our adult lives, which, again, you get no community connection in that at all. And I guess that would explain why, too, when you get to adulthood and don't have a conceptual framework for grief, why that replacement thing comes in.
Absolutely.
It's like you don't know what to do, so you just replace the duck.
Right.
You don't know what to do.
Absolutely,
so just get you another duck.
Because this hurts, and I'm not used to this feeling. And I don't want to allow this. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to replace it, and I won't hurt as badly. And what happens after that is we've done that so many times that we're not emotionally healthy. That does not bring out emotional health, because so what we do is we learn to wear the mask, right? And so we don't show it. I can't tell you how many times I've gone through a receiving line at a funeral and there are children involved, and somebody will bend down and say to them, "You're going to have to be the adult now. You're going to have to be,
you're going to have to grow up. You're
going to have to be strong." And what that communicates to the child is being strong is not crying. And so...
And not being emotional. Then.
And not showing emotion and not being sad. And so what you do is learn to wear this mask early on. And the mask hides so much. And what happened, it's like a tea kettle that doesn't have the little hole at the top for the steam to come out, and all this steam builds up and builds up and builds up. And when it does, it will it ambushes you.
Well, it's like a pressure cooker at that
Absolutely,
point.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you have all these, you have maybe large losses, but then smaller losses sort of interlaced with each other throughout life, and it's no wonder, even in my own life, why I hit age 25 and I felt like I had so much unresolved grieving. And this was that was about 5 years after my grandfather had passed away, which I just put out a little post about. If anybody's interested, they can check that out.
I'd like to see that too.
But I felt like I had so much unresolved grief personally. I know that I buried myself in work. So
That's
I replaced...
Keep busy. That's another myth. Right.
Yeah. I've replaced my grandfather with, a full-time school load. Actually, I was doing 21 credit hours in the last semester of my senior year. I was doing 21 credit hours. Wow. I was working 30 hours a week at Dick's Sporting Goods, and then doing a full-time internship on the weekend at a church. And so I buried myself by the time I hit late college. And I remember, like, after I graduated, I went home and just had no idea what to do with myself. I didn't have work to go straight into, but when I found it, I did. And I extended myself in those ways. And in some of the relational patterns that you were talking about too, like in relationships, I wound up doing some of those very, very same things. But you have these compounded griefs, I guess, or grieving phases that we need to go through.
Absolutely.
And we just avoid them, I guess, too, because it keeps us from acknowledging that we're also going to die. Addressing the death of someone else or the loss of dependence or anything like that is an acknowledgement of our own finitude. It's we want to avoid that at all costs. That's powerful. Yeah. That's powerful stuff. I wonder, do you, I don't know, in your work with hospice, so could you break down a little bit what you do with hospice? Because I know you've volunteered with them over the years.
Yes, I have. I don't do it as much anymore. But I tell you, I got into hospice after, you remember Dr. Bowdle, his first wife, Nancy, had Lou Gehrig's disease. And I watched him grieve while she was still living. And that was my first... acknowledgement of just looking at it, and he would come by my office and we'd talk, and I would ask him, "Please tell me if I ever offend you." And people are so good about that. If they know if they know you, that you won't be offensive, that you're not offensive. And he helped me more than anything. But I remember one day he came in and said, I think I've taken her to the mall for the last time because I have to strap her in the wheelchair, and I think now she's bedbound. And he cried, and I went, oh, you're already grieving. And when I said that, he left. And I went, oh no, I've said something to offend him. And he came back, and I said, please tell me. And he said, no, it was the first time I realized, yes, I'm already grieving, because there are things that are stopping that. And so especially when a lover turns into a caregiver, and changes roles, you're already going through the grief process while the person is still there. And when she died, I did my hospice training. I wanted to do something substantial for her, because I would go visit her while he would teach some. I would stay with her. And instead of flowers, I wanted to do something. And I realized how hospice was for her. The hospice volunteers would come and play the piano for her.
Wow.
And they were just amazing. And so I did the training to be a volunteer. And my first client, my first patient, this is what I would ask, Lord, I'm teaching and I'm with college students all day, and they're just at the prime of life, and I don't get that. I like the extremes, the pendulum, the way it swings, it's crazy, but I do. And I said, Lord, help me because I don't think anybody needs to die alone. That's the biggest thing to me. Help me to be with them, and if I can bring them to know you, if they haven't had the opportunity, you make a way. And for a long time, I would wait until the right time, because I think we push our agenda, and that was an agenda, but we don't allow the Holy Spirit to convict. And so I prayed that God would make my spirit to where I would know when the opportunity was right, not make it happen. Does that make sense?
Well, you can't force comfort.
Yes,
right?
yes.
You can't force comfort.
Right.
Whether it's faith comfort or whether it's physical comfort.
Absolutely.
Like you can't force that on someone if they're not actually in a spot to receive it.
Yeah. So I had this one patient, my first patient. And he was mean as a snake. He was 71 years old, and he wasn't watching TV. We would sit for 2 hours while his wife was at a meeting, and he was sitting with his oxygen in his nose when I first started, and he would be on the couch right across from me, and we would look at each other about like you and I are looking right now, except I could tell he was peeved at me because he didn't even want me there. And the first thing that hospice told me, and I'm working with a different hospice now, was I don't get used to him, because she dismisses somebody the first time after every somebody only goes one time to see him. Okay, so I'm trying to find something that we can talk about for 2 hours, and I see a picture of him in a uniform, military uniform, and my dad was, and I'm an Army brat, right? Yeah. And so that was it. And he looked like Rhett Butler in this picture with his uniform, and I stood up and got it, 8x10 picture, and I said, is this you? And he said, yeah, that's me. And we start talking about Germany, because my mother's German. And so I speak a little German to him, and we just hit it off. And he did tell me that night, he said, my wife's trying to kill me. And I said, what makes you say that? And he said, she won't let me smoke. And I said, well, sir, you have oxygen. Contrary, she is trying to keep you alive and to keep the house from blowing up. But we found out the reason she dismissed people was because she had a voice-activated tape player, and every time he would say this to a volunteer, they'd say, really? And they would let him believe that. But I spoke in defense of her, so she let me stay, which was great.
You spoke truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I had him I went to see him every Thursday night for several months, and I never found the opportunity until very near the end. And he said, one night I came in, and sure enough, she was turning his oxygen on, off, and when I'd come in, I'd turn it on, right? And so it was cold one night. I could see my breath in the bedroom that she had put him in. He was bedbound, and he just had a T-shirt on with a blanket over him. And I remember putting my coat over him because I didn't want to go through anything to try to find a blanket, and he was unconscious or sleeping. And so I'm trying to warm him up, and I bend over his bed, and I'm rubbing his arms and I start humming, "Yes, Jesus Loves Me." I don't know why that song, but his eyes, I was in his space. His eyes opened up really big, and he said, "Am I in heaven?" And I told my husband, I said, somebody thought I was an angel. First and last time that's happened. But I said, he said, "No, I'm not in heaven. I'm mean as a snake." And there was my opportunity. But he said, "My mom used to sing me that song," and there it was. And I said, "Oh, your mom sang you songs like that? Then you were raised in the church?" "Yes." And he said, "But I'm too mean, and God won't have anything to do with me." And I remember telling him, "Have you ever washed a car?" And he looked at me like I was crazy. "Where are you getting this from?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Wouldn't you rather wash a dirty one than a clean one? Because you can see the difference." And he began to cry, and I prayed the sinner's prayer with him that night after months of being with him, and he died not long after. But this was my first patient, and when he died, I was not ready for it. It threw me for a loop, and I thought, this is what I'm getting into. I'm getting close to people, and then they're dying. They're all dying because that's why they're in hospice. They have 6 months or less to live. And so the next client I had was a sweet lady, and I'm so glad she was a Christian because I determined I would not get close to her. And she died, and I felt horrible because I had not. And I said, "God, I don't have this right. I don't have this right. Are you sure this is something I need to be doing? It's tearing my heart out, and I have to love them to do service with them. And when I remove my love from them, I'm not doing any good for them, but it's tearing my heart out." And God, it reframed for me that, you might be the last person that this person sees on earth. And if you see it as ushering someone into eternity, can you do that? And that's the way I reframed it. And so I sat with a lot of people with their last breath, taking their last breath. And they weren't all the same. No death is the same, just like no grief is the same. It's unique to the person. But I found that there are some things worse than death, and that's to linger in pain. And that's to be hopeless and not have a hope for the future and not have the hope of eternity. And so there are some things worse than death, and I have seen it's helped me reframe death in a way that I have seen people leave that are so ready that they're at peace. And there is such a difference when they don't fight. Does that make sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And I can see your role as the angel there, right? As like a sort of helping, because I guess grief affects the person dying too. If it's not an immediate death, they're grieving the loss of their own life.
Yes.
And there's a lot of coming to terms with. I mean, I've not been there personally, but even as you're saying, like this gentleman woke up and was like, "No, I'm mean as a snake. Like God wouldn't even get close to me, and here you are rubbing his arm. You know, it's like you're in that space. I guess it's you and him, but it's that community buffer that you're talking about. It's like you are helping." You're helping him come to terms, or you're helping other people come to terms with the end of their life, and sort of ushering them through that process, helping them grieve the loss of their own lives, and sort of preparing them for what's next. I know everybody has like different ideas of heaven or hell or an afterlife, or some people don't believe in it at all. But like for those who do, I mean, to feel truly connected to it, I think you do have to accept, like you do have to accept your death to really feel truly connected to anything beyond it. So that's powerful, because your second story says, well, it also has to be emotionally connected. Absolutely. It can't just be, I'm sitting here in the corner, sort of like not connected to this person, not bringing my love into this room, but it's that love and that care and compassion that actually helps people grieve. Right?
Absolutely, yes.
Wow. And I can't think of a better person.
Thank you.
I can't.
You just love me.
I do. Well, that's some very powerful advice and conceptualization of grief, both helping. It's interesting, we went from one end of the spectrum to the other, like helping children understand grief, to helping someone who's about to die understand grief. But what's interesting is, Lena, you've been an instrument in both ends. I don't know that everybody has this experience with hospice or sitting with people as they die. Maybe once or twice that's happened in their life. But I think it's an incredible thing that you can speak from both sides of that. I was watching a movie with the kids. It was called The Little Prince. It's a special on Netflix, and I had I knew it was a kid's book, but I had no idea what the book was about, and I certainly didn't expect what happened in the documentary, but it was an in-depth, metaphorical, and also in-your-face story that walks through a little girl grieving the loss of her neighbor and understanding death. And he really, it's so beautifully done, but I think the end of the story brings it together really well, which is like, to be a good grown-up, you can't stuff all of your emotions. You can't overwork yourself and just pursue money or pursue work or pursue the next new thing or pursue the best school or pursue the best education. It's like, those things aren't bad, but if they come at the cost of your emotions, you wind up not growing up well, and then you have no idea how to handle that grief. So just like popped into my mind, because this little girl sat at the bedside with her neighbor at the end of this story as he died, and that's how this thing wraps up. And it's a very powerful one. My kids had a ton of questions, I bet, at the end of it, but she and his last words to her were, "You're gonna make a great grown-up." That's what he says to her. And so it's like this, I don't know, it covered both ends of the spectrum.
I have a book for you a friend of mine just wrote for children, that she loses a friend of her friend's sibling. And it goes through a lot of what you do and how you talk to children about it. Jeannie Bird, she's coming to teach one of my encore classes about how to deal with children, but she was a principal for many years. And so I'm going to leave a book for you in here.
Yeah, please do.
That you can keep.
Is it a kid's book?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I'll read it on the podcast or something.
Absolutely,
like that.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
And so I'll give that to you for sure. The thing of it is that we have the opportunity to make it not this scary thing by introducing it early on and in significant ways that touch the child, like watching a movie. That's fantastic. Or like, we have my neighbor, her son is just going through, he has a brain tumor, going through illnesses and things like that we cannot protect our children from. And it brings questions to them very early on that we need to be ready to answer. And I remember one of my granddaughters asked me one time, because we got some news about her mother, that she had an incurable disease, and she is so much better right now, and we thank God for that. But she said, "Is she going to be all right?" I can't answer that. Right. But what I can do is sit with her and hold her and cry with her and show and model for her
Yes.
what we do, and we don't do it alone. We have family. And it hit me this past year has been a rough year for me. And all of this happened during that time. And I felt for the first time in my life, I felt anxious. For the first time in my life, I felt sad, really sad, and depression. I could see it coming because there was nothing I could do about my daughter, about the diagnosis they gave her. And I thought, I told God, this is something I cannot, it got me. It buckled me at the knees. And I dealt with it for a couple of weeks, and I just felt this cloud over me. And I remember one day saying, God, I gave her to you. I dedicated her to you when she was born. I am not taking her out of your hands because they're still the best hands to be in. So the only thing I can control, because we're all going to die, right?
Yeah.
The only thing I can control, we don't know when or the vehicle that's going to take us there. That's the thing that scares me.
Yeah, me too.
I hope I'm not embarrassed by it, you know.
But I hope mine isn't alone too.
Right,
with what
right,
you said.
right.
Yeah.
And so we don't have, but what can we control? We can love extravagantly every single day that we have people in our lives, because too many times something is gone and we did not take a moment to be thankful that we had them there then. And so words, if anything, death coming into my home has made me so aware of the people I have here now that I love, and I love them extravagantly.
Yes.
Right? And it has to be extravagant. So there's no room for me to argue.
Yes.
There's no room for me to not be at peace with my family. Because we realize what's important, and we love each other, and we're all in this together, and anything we do together. And there's so much comfort in that. Honestly, I can say that released my anxiety. I used to go to work in the morning, and this song would come on, and it was like God put it there. It's a secular song. Everything's going to be all right.
Is it the Bob Marley song?
Yes, I love it. I love it.
Just listening to that in the car with David on the way back over here.
I love that song, and that would be on the radio, and I would go, thank you, thank you, God, thank you. And just getting little things like that. And after Phil died, I went to work. It was a couple of days later, and I left my phone at home, so I got in the car, which made me late. But because it was after 8 o'clock, that song came on, and I went, all right, Phil, everything's going to be all right.
Yes. Yeah, and the lyrics to that song, particularly, like it woke up this morning to the rising sun, 3 little birds on my doorstep singing sweet songs, a melody pure and true. This is my message for you. It's just like that simplicity and that, like you said, awareness. That death bringing that awareness of what is actually living around us, that we can love and that can love us back.
Absolutely. That
call to awareness. And I appreciate you bringing up Phil. For anybody listening, Phil is Lena's husband who passed away earlier this year. Right. And so I appreciate you bringing that up, Lena. And I know that that's fresh. And I know in the midst of it, you were teaching a class on grief.
Yes.
Right after that happened. But it's that song bringing peace to you in that in that moment, in that message of like, okay, everything's going to be all right, but that's kind of up to you in your own mind.
Absolutely.
Right. And
absolutely.
That death being an endpoint, or just death helping open up our eyes to everything. It's like it's all right if I participate. It's not all right if I don't participate, though. Right? If I completely withdraw right now, then it's not. Things are not going to be all right. But if I stay, like if I try and stay plugged in, and I think too, in hearing that and kind of thinking about it, it's also like you have something to receive there too, right? I remember having conversations with you about the things that you had brought up over the last few minutes, and like I received from you, and I hope that you received from me. But that was an opportunity for us to give to each other, right?
Yes.
And so, that is, I think, one of the more hopeful parts of grief.
Yeah.
Is if you can
absolutely
connect, because there can still be hope in grief that's not even plugged into eternity, that's even plugged
absolutely
in
you're
right now in the moment, and that's
yes.
the hope and gratefulness for the world and people around you, particularly your family, in this grieving process, pulling you guys so tightly together.
Absolutely.
To have seen that over the last year.
Right. Yeah. Well, we had the opportunity, my daughters were there with me when Phil took his last breath. It was the first time, I think, maybe my oldest daughter, she's a preacher's wife, so she may have been around that before, but certainly for Katie, it was her first time, and for it to be someone so close to you. But because, and I see this, I look for nuggets, even in the worst day. Even if you have to dig through a lot of crap, you look for that nugget and you'll find it, right? Okay, what possible good has come out of this? And so I look for those nuggets. I got to call my daughters in when I saw my husband was taking his last breath, and we certainly did not expect to lose him. But I asked him to come in, and I said, he was facing me. We had him propped up facing me, and I asked them to come in behind him and say whatever they wanted to say to him, because we were getting ready to witness a miracle. And we were ushering him into heaven, and this is exactly how he wanted to go. He refused to go to the hospital. He sent the EMT away, and very few people get to say, this is how I'm going to go. And I absolutely believe that he was honored in dying peacefully at home. And they came in and they began to tell him how much they loved him. And how great a father he was. And the whole 24 hours before we had was a gift. We had, he wasn't in pain. He was short of oxygen. We didn't realize it then, but his heart was already starting to fail him. And he had a sense of humor. He was lucid. He blessed our girls, both of them, told them how proud he was of them. And we laughed and we talked about what an unlikely pair we were. He was more of an introvert, and I'm not. But we laughed about those things and reminisced about all 48 years. I just celebrated 48, my 48th anniversary, and I did celebrate it. It's crazy, but I did. I had friends over, and it was beautiful, and that's why community is so important. And my girls and my son-in-law and my granddaughters took me out to eat, and we had a wonderful evening. And we celebrate our life together. 48 years is a big deal. And so I think when we grieve without regret, and this gave them an opportunity to come in and say those words, and I said, he hears you, so say whatever you want to say, because I don't want you to grieve with regret of not being able to have said what you need to say. Now, if we live, and I'm so sorry for those people that are hurt because they didn't have the opportunity to do that. This is why I think if we live our lives loving extravagantly, we won't grieve with regret. And do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
And if we live our lives and love those that are in our lives that God has put there, and even if we made choices in the middle of sin, still they're in our lives, and we love them extravagantly. And that's not to say don't ever get a divorce. I'm not saying that at all.
Yeah, sure.
I'm saying love those, love those people extravagantly that are in your life, because a lot of times we treat the people that we're closest to the worst. right? I have been.
We can be so hard on
We
the people
can.
we know the best.
Absolutely, because we know they're going to forgive us, and we just kind of take them for granted.
Well, and we see all the things.
Absolutely,
right? And so
yeah.
sometimes feel it's our place to judge.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if we love extravagantly, and I think that's what the nugget that death has brought into my life. I know we're all going to die. I don't know when it's my last breath. I do not want somebody being hurt by something I said, and it's staying with them the rest of their lives. Do you understand?
Yes.
And so I think when we live and love like that, and I don't think I would have done that so well if I hadn't had the training with hospice. And because you know what, it's really interesting with hospice. My hospice patients, I've never had anybody say when they sign the paperwork that they realize the doctors have done everything they can for them, and there's nothing else they can do unless God heals them, and that has happened. And But when they do that, they never say, hey, let me go back to work. It's always relationship mending they want to do. It's crazy. But it's always real. And I remember one lady that I worked with that was very promiscuous, and her children were taken away from her early on. And now they were grown, and she hadn't seen them in years because they had been adopted out. We got them back together to see their mother. And so here's another thing. We often judge harshly. And when I heard this woman's story, she was 13 and her mother died of breast cancer. And this is what happened. She told her mom, I'm tired of staying in the hospital. I'm going to my friends. They're having a party. She was gone and the mother died. Think about the guilt that she lived with. And then her father remarried very quickly because he had been taking care of her and she was sick for a long time. And the stepmother didn't like her. Well, she found out early on, 13, 14, 15 years old, that she could, in order to get something she craved, which was love, she would give her body. Right? And so we don't understand why. We're very judgmental sometimes, and we say that's not the right way to live, when I think we need to be more of a bridge. We bring the drawbridge up and let people drown in the moat. Right? But if we're the drawbridge, I think that's what we're created for. And hear a person's story. And so there were a lot of borderline personality disorder, a lot of things going on with her, but all she ever wanted was to be loved, and she gave her body in order to get a moment's love that she assumed was love, and it was the only kind of love that she had ever been given that she understood, and so she got a reputation for it. Being able to walk with this lady and bringing her children, grown children by now, she had a grandbaby she didn't know about, bringing her grown children and watching them love each other and care for each other. The look on her face, I mean, she completely morphed into somebody else, it was beautiful. And all she ever wanted to be was a bride, and she was never a bride. Do you know that we went to Goodwill and bought her a wedding dress, her son and daughter, and she and I, while she was still doing well, and she was buried in that wedding dress. Because we get to write the rules, right?
Oh, yeah, you do.
We don't have to do it like everybody else does it. And it's okay if people think we're crazy. If they take a little time to get to know us.
Well, it's like when you let the drawbridge down, you understand that that's not so crazy,
right?
Like that's really important for her to have God in that, and for her family,
absolutely,
to be there and to be able to accept her in that state. I mean, that again is helping her grieve and helping them grieve.
It was beautiful.
Well, and it makes me think to one of my favorite authors, and I think you know this, Irvin Yalom, that the listeners probably get tired of me bringing him up. But no, he talks about this idea of rippling, and it's not necessarily his idea, but it's like he doesn't believe in a God or an eternity, but he believes believe that like his actions on earth have a tremendous ripple and impact, and that's actually true. I mean, that's rippled into my life, which is subsequently rippled way beyond me. I'm thinking now as we're talking through this, it's not just about like in that instance, whatever happened in that moment, she was also allowed to ripple into the generations that would have never had that impact, to see that type of healing that can come in a moment like that, right? It's like they actually got to experience the ripple. And in my work with clients as well, but even in my own personal idea of death, it feels really important for me and for the people that I've worked with to feel like they're leaving some sort of not necessarily mark, but just like they've made some sort of ripple, that's some sort of impression that's going to move beyond. And like I think that can be just the simple act of dying well, too, right? I think about Phil and how he wanted that to be, and how you explain that, like he wanted that, and in essence he ripples into generations to come as like, this is how you can die well, right? This is how you can die well. This is what a good book ending looks like while you're here on earth. And I think having read some about cancer support groups, that becomes one of that emerges oftentimes as one of the primary goals of the group, is to, because subsequently like their members are going to die like while they're in the group, and so the members will take on a sort of, whoever is the sickest sort of subconsciously takes on this mission of I want to show everyone how to die well. And part of that means accepting the death, but also starting to really, really invest in the community that's around you to the best of your abilities. Right? Yes. And it's their grieving, that person is in the stages of grief themselves, right? Which the stages of grief apply to the person dying as well. I think oftentimes it gets teased out like the stages of grief are only for those affected by death, or for like family members or friends that have lost someone, which it can, but those stages of grief are really for the person who's dying. And so I don't know, when you weave all of that together, I guess a good ending, and I guess this is a little more difficult if you die suddenly, right? But that's kind of a different thing. But when you have time with people, and you know that your death is coming soon, part of that grieving for yourself would be trying to ripple, trying your best to ripple. And I really see you as an agent in that story to help her actually have some sort of ripple and feel like, okay, like I can die now.
Can we go back to the stages of grief?
Yeah, go for it.
Kubler-Ross, did the stages, and I remember Dr. Battle was the one that said it. After his wife died, he said, they keep asking me why I'm not angry. I don't have anger toward God, and it's like you have to go through this stage to get to the next one. She wrote that for people that have just gotten word that they have an illness. So, and I do want to say this, that in grief, when we've lost someone, we're also uniquely different. That I think if we want a formula, right? Because a formula is easy to follow. But I think the grief walk, the grief journey is so individual that I don't think there are stages. Yeah,
it's like a roller coaster.
Actually. Absolutely.
Like if there are stages, you're roller coastering between them, so you can go through one and then just sort of loop right back around it. Everybody's roller coaster looks completely different based on their experiences to their biology. I mean, that can, like that spectrum can. Everybody's roller coaster.
Yeah, and those are possible things that we deal with.
Yes.
Okay, you can tell that I'm a church girl. And a lot of times we are angry with God because we believe that when we ask, we shall receive. And we pray for healing. And I remember, can I go on about this?
Oh, please go for it.
I remember I did that with my dad. In fact, my mother, oh my goodness, she is just all about faith, and she would not let people come and see him unless they believed he would be healed, right? But I remember when I had to take that curve and realize that he may die, and it was not. It didn't mean my faith wasn't strong,
right?
Because we're all going to die.
We can't prevent the inevitable,
right? And so I remember when I was praying and the prayer of faith, I thought, God, heal my dad, heal my dad. And then I realized that if you are a Christian, if you're not a Christian, then you don't have to listen to this. But if you are a Christian, even Jesus Christ modeled it for us. When he was in the garden, he prayed till his sweat became his blood. That's how hard he prayed. Father, let this cup pass from me.
Oh, he was very stressed.
Right?
Yeah.
He made his petition known, and I think we make our petition known. But we have to get to that faith part, and that's the part that says, nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. Nevertheless, if my loved one is not healed, help me. Help me to know that you are still, that you're still divine, you're still God. Help me know, and I guess the way you would put that, because I think Christians are the ones that get angry with God, because if you're an atheist, there's no anger there, right?
Right.
So
anger at the universe,
yeah,
and the way things
but
work,
but I think that when we see that, nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. When we get to that part, there is such and I had to get there with my mother and my husband. There is such a release, and it's almost comforting. It's almost a peace, and it's hard to explain. But okay, God. I'm going to accept what happens next, and it's not going to make me angry, because I realize we all are going to die. That's the big news flash. We're all going to do it. We just don't know when, and we don't know how.
Well, and that's such good advice, Lena, for the Christian, because what it does is it doesn't cause us to immediately put a buffer of heaven in place of our anxiety about death. Like what you just said means that you actually have to face reality. And then if you're a Christian, you're bringing God in to help you deal with the anxiety of, oh wow, not only is this person going to die, whether that's right now or 2 years from now or 10 years from now, but I am too. And that, I think that's when you're talking about that garden scene where where Jesus Christ is bleeding from his pores due to just the tremendous stress. Like he knows what's about to happen in the story. And he even says, like, let it pass from me. Like take it or I'll take it. They're very, very powerful words. And if you go back and look at them, like, I think Jesus actually toys with the idea of death before death on the cross. Like he toys with it in his head. You can hear it in his words, in the way he frames things, in the way in what he says. He's like, take it from me. I can't actually do this thing. And so when we're talking about like the faith of a Christian, like doubt actually has a place. It's what helps us realize that we are human and that we're not God himself.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes,
it's like, and Jesus was God and wasn't God, right? And so, but this doubt let him know that he wasn't God, that he was indeed going to have to endure this end. And ultimately he brings God back into it at the end of like, okay, like I'll do it. I'll do it. I think there's this amazing scene in Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think it's that one where they're going to find the Passover cup, the cup of eternal life, right? And he's being chased by a bunch of German Nazis.
Yeah,
right?
I know. I'm always the bad guy.
I know. They're chasing him down, and he comes to this cavern, and it looks like there's nothing. It looks like a 400-foot drop off into a river,
Right.
and the path he's supposed to go is directly across it. And he's looking at this book that his father gave him, and he has all these notes in the book. His father has taken notes about where he believes this cup is, because his father was an archaeologist too. He's an archaeologist. He's going to try and find this cup, but he's being chased. There's no way he can turn around. He has to go forward. And he's looking at it, and in the sketch, I believe that there's something to the extent of, now it's time for the leap of faith. Like something to the extent of that. And there's like nothing else in the book. His father has just deduced that you're going to have to take a leap of faith at some point in time. And so it's one of my favorite scenes in a movie. He kind of closes his eyes and sticks his foot straight out and just like steps into the ravine. And it turns out whoever had covered up, tried to cover up to protect this cup. There was a rock bridge, but they had painted it to match the floor. They had painted it to match the actual canyon itself, but there was this bridge across, and so he grabs a pile of rocks and throws it out, and you can see the pebbles kind of scatter over the bridge. But I think that is sort of this accurate description of facing the anxiety of our deaths, right? And also the true hope of Christianity, which is that there is something there to land on. Right. Like there is something there to land on. So that just popped up into my head. I'm glad you brought that up, because what we talked about in the last podcast is the tendency, I think, and that's where I think you see a lot of the anger at God, is when us as Christians, when all of our hope is in eternity and none of it is present in the now. When things are taken from you and taken from you and taken from you, and all you're holding on to is something you can't see, feel, hear, touch, smell, like you can't sense it at all, you start to become very bitter and angry. Sure. Right? You're buffering your own death with something that you're not taking place in yet. Right. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because it really accents like, as a Christian, you do need, like just as Christ did, but he faced death every day he woke up, knowing how this was all going to end, right? And he still chose to live. Right. Death is in the contract of life. That's how I like to think about it. It's like, and we sign it every morning when we put our feet on the floor. Right. But
it doesn't have to overwhelm us.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Sorry, I got off on a big rabbit trail.
That was good. No, that was good. That's good.
That's
good. Yeah.
It makes me wonder that, okay, so guys, if you don't know Lena is also an incredible storyteller, which you've probably already gathered from the podcast. But I've noticed, I think over the years, in having been present at least with the last 3 big losses of your life, with your father, your mother, and your husband, how has you storytell a lot, whether that's on Facebook or when we're together. It's like, how clearly are, and maybe I'm looking into that too much, but it seems like narrative is very helpful in the grieving process.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about
Absolutely. that? We tend to, and this is learned, this is a myth, don't say anything, but they just lost so-and-so last week. And we tend to avoid it, but I say invite people to your story, because they don't know that they can talk about it unless you do. And so I'll give you, for instance, and I tell my class all the time, when you invite somebody, you're only in control of what you do. You can't control whether or not they're gonna attend, right? So you don't know whether they're gonna feel comfortable being invited. Here's an example. A week after my dad died, I was at the grocery store, and I saw his favorite cookies, Deloba cookies with the jam, the oval ones with the jam inside, and I was reaching up to get it. And if you've ever gone through grief, you know what ambush is like. And just as I touched the box, I realized that he wasn't going to be home for me to take them to him. And I started crying because I am a daddy's girl. And I began to cry. And there was a lady down the way from me, and she kind of looked at me and then looked away really fast because she was uncomfortable. And when she looked at me again, I said, I just got ambushed. Now, this is a complete stranger. I meet more people this way. I just got ambushed. This is my dad's favorite cookie, and I just lost him last week. He died last week. Now, she can either choose to go to the next aisle and get away from me as fast as she can, or she can engage with me, and she did. She came over. She touched me on the shoulder and said, I'm so sorry. That is comforting to me. That comforts me. I remember my class last semester. I do go to class, and I don't tell my class about my personal life, okay? And so I was living with my mom, and we just gotten news about my daughter, and it was in the 2 weeks that I was really low, and I hadn't told my class about it. Met them every Tuesday night. There were about 17. Usually there are about 40 in there, but I think that's a God thing. That was a God thing for me that semester. And I went in, and I had just gotten a call saying that my sister was with my mother, that things weren't looking too good. And so I was going to dismiss class early, but I had never told them that I was living with my mother. I never told them that she had cancer. I never told them that we had just gotten a diagnosis on my daughter. None of that. And I was carrying that. And I knew I had 2 guys in my class that had written papers, and they were questioning God. So I went in my class, and I was going to have to dismiss. So I said, I'm going to give you a lesson in life tonight. I'm not going to go into what I had prepared for you, but I want you to know what I'm dealing with, because I was crying. I walked into my classroom crying, and I had to tell them. So I felt like, okay, so now I'm sharing with them what I was going through. And so I said, so ask me any question you want to, because I'll give it to you raw, and then I'm going to dismiss class. And one of the guys said, Miss Barber, you seem like a good Christian woman. Aren't you mad at God? And I said, on the contrary, I don't think I could do this without God. I know I couldn't. I couldn't do this without God. Because I got a news flash for you people. We're all going to die. And I'm sure they didn't want to hear that. But we're all going to die. We just don't know the vehicle that's going to take us there. And I told them what I was struggling with. And then I said, and I believe the only thing I have control of right now is to love them extravagantly. So I'm going to go home and love them. I'm going to love them. And another young lady raised her hand and said, can we come pray with you? And that whole classroom got around me and prayed for me. Everybody. And it comforted me so much. And so I'm saying we don't have to walk this journey alone. It helps to have people. It helps to tell the story. Josh, here's another thing I'd love to bring in. So there are things that we do after someone has lost someone, because we don't know how, right? We're not educated in how to talk to people or what to say, and everybody's different. We don't know if they're open to it. The morning after, the day my husband died, they had just taken his body. I believe it was that day. And my girls said, somebody just came to the house. And Josh had left a beautiful big bouquet of flowers on our step, and a chicken, I'll never forget, and salad. He brought everything. You know what? He didn't ask me, what can I do for you? Because you are so numb that you don't know. You cannot decide anything. And it's something that you know it if you've gone through it. But I was guilty of saying, what can I do for you? And when you just do, it was such a beautiful gift to me. And he left it there, and they could see his car leave. And so I called him after that. He was texting me to tell me that something was on the front door because he didn't want it to get bad. But things like that, when you have friends and you have community, you don't have to say the perfect words that will take away the sorrow, because you're not going to do it. There are no perfect words.
No.
But to walk with that person, even just a touch, even just that stranger's hand on my shoulder, even just, I'm so sorry, even I don't know what to say, I'm hurting for you, I'm hurting with you. Knowing that you're not carrying that alone is huge. And so I think just being aware that we're not going to say the perfect thing. What is that all about anyway? When you go through the receiving line and you're listening to what people are saying, and it's almost your turn and you want to say something to them, why do you want to do that? To make yourself feel better?
To insulate yourself.
Right. And so sometimes words just aren't necessary. But being there is wonderful. It's wonderful. So,
you know, I had a little, I got bashful when you brought me in there, like the leaving the flowers on your doorstep. I mean, I think it's important to say that I have like a little mini you in my head sometimes, Lena.
Do you?
Yeah, I've spent.
She's cute, isn't she?
I like you know, when I was going through stuff at Lee, things became very difficult for me at a period of working there, and you came directly in with both your personality, your faith, and reality, and you squeezed them into my office because all three of those things are big for you: your faith, your personality, and how you carry reality, right? But you squeezed them all into a room, and you encouraged me, and you brought me hope, and I'll never forget that. I think that's what opened like that connection between people that happened in that moment for us. And so like when I'm thinking about, my God, my friend Lena has just experienced two in just not even calculable, not just tremendous loss in the last year. It's like, I feel that because you've let me into your life.
Right.
Like, I feel that there's a little mini Lena in there, and I think she also gives me advice when I don't know what to say or what to do, because you're so good. You're so good at seeing what a person may need, or what a person may like, or what they may be encouraged by, and just sliding it in there. And so, I think even in that moment, kind of breaking down my process, because I had talked to Julia just before that, and I was like, we were headed up to the hike. You know, I was driving to Virginia that day. And I was like, I really would like to do something for Lena. And if I really, really scan myself to think, okay, where did that come from? That's like, it came from the connection that we've had as friends over the years, and being there for each other, and realize, like, I guess you may not know what to say or what to do at all if you're not actually emotionally connected to people. And I think that's the value of allowing yourself to share the story in the grocery store. Right? Like, there's no connection without there's no connection without the story. You don't
That's
know.
why the narrative is important. And the authenticity comes through better than anything, more than anything. You know, people know if you're authentic.
Well, and I knew,
you genuinely care.
And I knew in that moment in my office when you came in and you put your hands on my shoulder while I was sitting at my desk, and you prayed over me. And I grew up in a Pentecostal faith and tradition, and in that moment, if you would have asked me 40 minutes before that moment, what is the last thing you need? I would have said for somebody to lay hands on me and pray for me. But you are, I know it's genuine. I knew in that moment, this is genuine, and this is actually what I need. And maybe, maybe the chicken on the doorstep is the
That was
reciprocation of that.
exactly what I needed. Oh, and
But
it
you
was
just-
like a hug. That chicken was like a hug to me. And you know what? There is something about a hug, and I know everybody's not a hugger. And so what you do is you don't make a person uncomfortable by putting something on them that they're not comfortable with. But you let them know that you care in some way, and there's always a way to show that.
That genuine.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me that our conversation has turned into how to live well. And there's something about facing death and facing grief and facing transition and facing things you have no control over, that just, if you process it well, and especially because we're friends, and we're processing it well, it immediately sort of pushes you into a space where you want to live well, and you start talking about, okay, so how do we live well, and that's just mind-blowing to me how that seems to happen. But it has happened even just now.
I think here's another myth. That we think when we've lost a loved one that we cannot laugh, or we feel this guilt over because we're living and they're not. And we wouldn't want that for anybody. And they certainly wouldn't want it. And I kind of feel still being my cheerleader a lot of times. I still feel him saying, "You go, girl," because he blessed me with beautiful words. And I think when he said those words to all of us, he was weary. He told me, "I'm weary." And he said, "Don't weep for me," and a big old tear fell on his chest. That's another myth. Don't cry. Don't feel bad. We can't wear the mask. No. Be authentic, be real. And I laughed while I was crying on him. And I said, "Well, that worked, didn't it?" And I said, "I never have listened to you, have I?" And I think being able to feel these opposing emotions, laughing through... Still Magnolias, my favorite line in any movie is when Dolly Parton says, "Laughter through tears is my favorite emotion." Because it's giving us such a release. It's like that little hole at the teapot. We are expressing, and we can, I think that we represent our loved ones that have gone better when we can smile and have memories of them that are precious. And you know what I'm doing for Thanksgiving? My girls don't know this. I don't want them to hear this. Where I got his shirts cleaned, and the favorite shirts that my girls have bought him for Christmases before. I just had placemats made out of them.
No lie.
Yeah, and I had bags, little cinch bags made out of them. And I love that. I think there are so many ways that Phil will never die, because we will tell funny stories about him, and we will remember him in ways. And I think his grandchildren, great-grandchildren that have never met him will know him as long as we speak. And have memories,
It's a wonderful thing. It reminds me of the Dia de Muerto. Yeah, I believe it's just a Mexican holiday, though it may go into like Southern America too. But it's like the Day of the Dead. Right?
I just watched a video of that.
Did you see Coco?
Yes.
Yeah, Coco. That kind of talks about that, and I believe it's kind of accurate to the traditions. But that if the family remembers the person, they have an opportunity to come back to them on the Dia de Muerto, right? And
How about that?
Yeah, that's a really cool. It's a really cool way of thinking about it, but of thinking about this thing that there's an opportunity to ripple through the lineage, and to have your story told
Absolutely.
through your lineage, but also outside of your lineage. Like, I'll be telling your story, you know, and if I go before you, maybe you'll be telling mine, I assume.
Josh.
So we never know, right?
That's
we
right.
never know.
That's right. We never know.
We never know.
We live each day to the
Yes.
fullest.
And I think that there's a lot of beauty when you position yourself, like what you said, with love. And I think Bob Marley would also be proud of
Yes,
you, because
I
his
bet he
answer
would.
was love, right? Is it what do we do? Well, we love, man.
I like it. I like his
worries,
concept.
No
Yeah.
worries, we just love. I think that idea of loving while we can, and I think there's so many people around us who need it, and we actually need to love. We need to do that.
We do.
It's so good for us
It
to do,
is.
though it's vulnerable, and you put yourself in a position where you can be hurt. Whatever is the opposite of love, I would designate that as hate. Is just poison.
Yeah.
It's when you get to 75 and you're laying on a bed and you're, you know, confessing to your hospice worker, like, I'm mean as a snake. God wouldn't even touch me. That's when you've participated in hate for your life. Like, that's where that ends. And thank goodness that was redemptive for him in the end, right? What a beautiful thing. But to live a life of love without that regret, it makes grieving easier for your family.
Absolutely.
It makes grieving easier for
Absolutely.
your friends, and then it also makes grieving easier for you.
Yes.
Like, if I'm to die tomorrow, I tell you, like an inventory of my life, the things that I would regret the most, or the times where I was most selfish, that would be certainly one of them. And the times where I reacted out of bitterness and hate, I think those would be my largest regrets. It makes me wonder if I should apologize for some of those things. I just had some things circle into my mind.
Did you?
I should be do some AA work or something.
Okay, that's conviction, not
Yes,
condemnation.
there you go.
Okay,
Right
you know
on.
that.
Yes.
It's wonderful to have conviction
Sure.
because you can do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then it can become a lesson for yourself and
Absolutely.
for those around you. But it makes me think of another activity I talked about on the last podcast too, which is like, if you actually picture yourself dying right now. Like, let's say we both drop dead right now. And this is just a thought exercise, but that you have to live your life on repeat from birth till now, over and over again for eternity. What will you do different moving forward to make your life more livable? Because you're going to have to relive it again.
Yeah.
As like when you start thinking in that manner, everything that we're talking about starts making a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it would be easier for me to live a life of love, even at the risk of being hurt, but it would also be easier and better for the people around me as well. I would, yeah.
Absolutely.
Fascinating. Well,
your wife's going to be so happy to see you when you get home and love on her and your children.
Yeah, man, it's so good to have conversations
It
like
is.
this, Lena. I really appreciate your time. And I think I was going to ask at the end, you know, what are a couple pieces of advice you have for somebody who may be grieving, but you've laid everything out there so systematically and also with very, very relevant emotions. But do you feel like there's anything else that you would want to put out there as important?
I think if you are grieving someone and you have regrets, first of all, I'd love for you to find a counselor.
Yeah.
And work through that, because you don't need to live with that. That person would not want you to live with that. But if you have regrets, if you will just write a letter, and even if it's somebody that you're angry about because they did you wrong, that letter, getting it out of your head and your heart and putting it on paper, can be so healing. And let somebody walk through that with you, because I think it's really important. I've done 3 letters. And it's just a good exercise. And I tell you what, this grief recovery handbook will take you through that. It's wonderful. This is what I was certified in, the grief recovery method, James and Friedman.
We'll post a link.
Yeah, good. It's a great book, and you can work through your grief recovery. Here's a myth that I want to tell you about. When you hear it just takes time, hospice is known to stay with a caregiver 13 months after their loved one has died, so they go through everything once. But you'll get that information and think, oh, I'm supposed to be okay now. And it puts a guilt on you that you may not be okay. Well, it's like Josh said, it's a roller coaster ride. And you never know. Absolutely. Yeah. And you never know what song might come on and ambush you, or what smell, through our senses. But just grief recovery is action. And it's not just sitting there, or it's not just taking time. It's not getting so busy that you just fall into bed. You do the narrative with someone.
Yes.
Talk it out with someone. Cry with someone. Get it out. And even if you don't have someone you trust, write it down. Be your own best counselor. You can do it. And invest in people. Invest in loving people. You cannot go wrong. You cannot go wrong by doing that.
Yeah, what a wonderful piece of advice. I'm of the opinion with you that I don't know that there's an end to grief. I don't feel that there is anyway, because there's always some sort of loss that presents itself that reminds us that we are going to lose.
But you know what? And like I said when we first started, grief is a new normal.
Right.
I come in, and we had a pattern every night. I'd come in and we cooked supper and we'd watch Jeopardy. That guy was winning so much, and we had rituals and things that we did that I looked forward to, and I would sit with my husband and say, this is my favorite part of the day. Well, I don't have that anymore. And so it's adjusting to the new norm. And making that move to the new norm. And grief is wanting to tell somebody something, and they're no longer there. I was going to call Phil up the other day and tell him about some news I heard, and I had his phone number dialed and realized he's not there. And a fresh set of tears. Grief is regrouping, but life is worth learning to reform and reinvest, and you'll have a new normal. It'll be different, but you can still have peace in it, and you can have joy, and you can also have sadness, because they coexist.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thanks, Lena. And I know from my own process of grief, just writing the little blog that I put out, Eat the Frogs First, I put it out, is a narrative of my grandfather. And it's been years. It's been 15 years. And still those memories are just so fresh. But I think what that type of work is, what you just said, adjusting to that normal over time, and writing a narrative and taking yourself and that event seriously, like allowing it to be a serious part of your life, and brush people off that say you should be over that by now. Just like brush that away. It's like, over what? My life is different now. So it's not getting over something. It's like, I'm now living differently altogether. So I think if anybody's interested in reading that, it's actually on Traverse's website. So great. As maybe it's a template for how you can do it, or if you know Lena, check out her statuses on her Facebook, because she does a wonderful job telling stories about the people that she loves. So, well, thanks, Lena. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And all the wisdom and insight you shared with us, but also just I'd really like that we got to have a conversation.
Me too.
I love getting able to spend time with you.
I
It's
always
nice.
do too.
Yeah. So, guys, the next podcast, a little unsure of what it's going to be on, but hopefully it will be, something you enjoy, and maybe have that out in the next couple of weeks. So thanks again, Lena. I really appreciate it. Yeah. You have been listening to The Counselor's Chair, sponsored by Traverse Counseling Services. For more information, visit our website at www.traversecounselingservices.com or email us at contact@infotraverse.com. Thank you again for listening, and we hope you'll join us next time. This podcast was recorded and produced by Josh Zello.